Hi everyone, I'm Lino. In recent years, along with the rise of the internet, a rather curious theory has become increasingly popular in certain online circles. According to this narrative, Western civilization, or even modern Western science and technology, did not develop independently at all. Instead, it supposedly originated from ancient Chinese books, and at the very center of the story stands one work, the Yongle Encyclopedia. Although mainstream academia considers this idea completely baseless, to be honest, I think it's pretty ridiculous. But it still enjoys remarkable popularity among some groups. This group of people advocates that Chinese people should not blindly admire foreign cultures or lack self-confidence, but should be proud of their own culture, and even believe that their own culture is the most powerful. Today, based on several sources, let us take a closer look at how this theory emerged, what it actually claims, and what kind of psychological logic lies behind it. First, how did this idea come into being? This theory did not appear out of nowhere. It was born from a combination of historical tradition, psychological projection, and exaggerated imagination surrounding the disappearance of the original manuscript of the Yongle Encyclopedia. Historically, it can be traced back to the so-called idea that Western learning originally comes from China. During the late Ming Dynasty, when Western science entered China through missionaries, some scholars, while learning Western mathematics and astronomy, also felt the pressure caused by the collapse of the old worldview. To ease this discomfort, they attempted to reinterpret reality, arguing that Western methods were actually derived from ancient Chinese knowledge such as the Zhoubi or the Nine Chapters. By the early Qing dynasty, even emperors publicly echoed similar views, and this mindset became an ideological comfort mechanism. If we are losing in reality, then at least we can declare victory in history. In the modern internet era, this psychological pattern has simply evolved into an upgraded version. Faced with the impact of Western modernity, some people prefer to believe that Western success was not built through innovation or social development, but rather through stealing China's cultural heritage. And thus, the Yongle Encyclopedia is elevated into a mythical civilization source code. Second, what exactly does this theory claim? Supporters describe a grand narrative of cultural theft. According to them, once the Yongle Encyclopedia was taken overseas, Western civilization suddenly blossomed. They claim that the age of exploration began because Europeans learned world geography from it. The Renaissance supposedly emerged after Europeans absorbed its humanistic spirit. Religious reform, philosophical change, and intellectual awakening were all, in their view, byproducts of reading Chinese classical texts. And when it comes to modern science, the story becomes even more fantastical. Newton, they say, only discovered the law of gravity after secretly studying pages from the encyclopedia taken by missionaries. Some even reinterpret the falling apple as a metaphor for the Ming Dynasty. They assert that the Industrial Revolution was inspired by technical descriptions hidden in the encyclopedia, that Western patents came from Chinese classics, and that the Encyclopedia Britannica was nothing more than a copied version of the Yongle Encyclopedia. In more extreme variations, even the English language itself is said to have been invented for the sole purpose of translating it. At this level, we are no longer discussing history, we are approaching science fiction. Now let us turn to the rebuttals. The first and most fatal problem is the timeline. The Renaissance began in the 14th century, long before the Yongle Encyclopedia was even compiled in 1408. The Industrial Revolution unfolded in the 18th century, while Westerners did not come into contact with scattered copies of the encyclopedia until after the mid-19th century. In other words, Western modernity was already well underway before anyone ever touched those texts. According to this myth, history apparently develops backward. Achievements appear first, and the source material shows up later. The second problem lies in the misunderstanding of what the Yongle Encyclopedia actually is. It is not an original scientific treatise, but a massive reference compilation. It collects earlier writings, Confucian classics, historical texts, literature, medicine, astronomy, mathematics, but does not contain mysterious secret knowledge. If these materials were truly sufficient to create modern science, then one must ask, Why did those who read them for centuries fail to achieve the same breakthroughs? The third issue is physical impossibility. The encyclopedia consisted of over 10,000 volumes and hundreds of millions of characters. Yet, according to these myths, someone supposedly smuggled it out of a heavily guarded imperial archive, transported it across continents, and left no trace in historical records. This level of imagination greatly exceeds even the limits of historical fiction. Finally, let us look at the psychology behind this narrative. At its core, this is not cultural confidence, but cultural insecurity wrapped in pride. It is a fantasy that says, if others surpassed us, it must be because they stole something that originally belonged to us, not because of their own reforms, institutions, or innovation. Ironically, the theory actually ridicules its own believers. It implies that we supposedly possessed the greatest treasure of knowledge for centuries, yet achieved nothing from it, while others allegedly glanced at it briefly and instantly created modern civilization. This is not self-glorification, it is self-inflicted sarcasm. In the end, the myth that Western civilization comes from the Yongle Encyclopedia is nothing more than a collective illusion, woven from historical trauma, national anxiety, and internet-age imagination. It turns a monumental cultural archive into a fictional technological blueprint, and converts insecurity into a form of psychological consolation. It is like a defeated swordsman who refuses to accept loss on the battlefield. Instead of acknowledging the opponent's strength, he convinces himself that victory was stolen from the family's secret manual. A manual which, in reality, contains nothing more than recipes and scriptures. This kind of imaginary triumph may provide momentary comfort, but it does nothing to bridge the real gap between civilizations. I believe that truly strong people don't care too much about what others think, but instead quietly strive to become stronger. I am Lino, thank you for listening.